Hi everyone, I'm James Mackenzie Blackman from Matthew Bourne's New Adventures and Reborn. We're a national and international dance company. I sit on the group that was convened by Arts Council England in 2011 to start exploring how we measure the quality of work with, by and for children and young people. And that group is made up of a range of organisations of different size and scales, organisations that work in urban settings and rural settings and across a wide variety of art forms. And I'm just behind us now are some images of projects that have been that are being delivered by organisations that we work with or have been involved in this project. Ben and Caroline, who will speak after me, have helped to steer and challenge and respond to the work that we've been doing as arts organisations. But what we thought would be a nice thing to do, might be a good way of illustrating the work we've been doing, is to share a real-life story of a project. My company, New Adventures and Reborn, is currently touring a large-scale dance theatre production of William Golding's iconic novel, Lord of the Flies, partly funded through Arts Council England's Strategic Touring Fund. And one of our ambitions for this project is to fully integrate boys and young men aged between around 10 and 22 with a company of professional dancers from New Adventures and to seek out those young people in communities with low engagement in the arts. We're striving for this project to be exciting, inspiring and engaging. So I'm going to tell you about a lad that I've called Jack. He's 11 and we found him in Plymouth. In fact, he kind of found us because he'd been chucked out of maths. And our community dance artist had gone into his school to deliver a kind of a taster workshop to find out about getting involved with Lord of the Flies. Jack's school is in a high level of deprivation. 72% of the students there are on free school meals. And something quite special happened. Our community dance artist could see pretty quickly that Jack had some real talent. He was nurtured and supported through the outreach programme that happened in the Southwest. And our staff there got to know him and his family. We discovered that Jack was one of 7 living in a 2-bedroom house, and this family had had no experience really of participating in the arts before. Jack was encouraged to eventually audition to have a part in Lord of the Flies, and there was this really incredible moment where our artistic team, who made up of some of the world's leading artists in my field and multi-award-winning artists, were really quite nervous about whether or not Jack should be in our show. Why? Because artists leading large-scale arts organisations are striving for excellence. And this project challenges them at all sorts of interesting moments to take risks. Our community dance artists in Plymouth knew that we should give Jack a chance. Why? Because we wanted to enable him to have some personal progression through this project. And quite frankly, we thought he probably could just about get the choreography. We also knew that Jack would help to make the show better in Plymouth and that our artists would learn from him. He was a kind of a boisterous, interesting little lad that we just all kind of sensed would have a great time on the project. So I'm just going to fast forward now to the last night in Plymouth, and I was stood at stage door at the Theatre Royal, and word went round that Jack's mum had got a tattoo on her arm that day that said Lord of the Flies and had 5 stars underneath. All of us as the company were kind of immediately felt quite challenged by that and surprised that this had happened, that this mum had made this really public demonstration of this project. It felt really important that I needed to kind of gather everyone to kind of talk about it because there was a lot of kind of madness and screaming and on the corridors about why this had happened. We talked about what that tattoo meant, and we decided that it may be a demonstration that this project was authentic in some way for Jack and his family and his parents. I was reminded that the previous week I'd seen Jack's mum clutching a load of lottery tickets, and I reminded my team that this project was lottery funded. And we all kind of had a conversation about what that meant and why it was okay and why it said something good about this piece of work. That evening, I was chatting to Jack's mum, and lots of people, she was very proudly showing her tattoo to everyone that had been involved in the project and all the dancers. She told me that she couldn't really read or write, so she didn't feel comfortable writing a letter to explain what impact this project had had on her and her son, and that was her way of demonstrating that this project had been meaningful for her and her family. So why is this story of relevance this afternoon? Well, for me, it demonstrates something about the notion of a set of quality principles. We embedded those principles throughout this project. The project continues, and it's doing something really interesting to help us to demonstrate and understand the impact we're having on individuals, their families, and on audiences. Jack's story is complicated. It's kind of difficult to share, but it's important because the quality principles that we've been developing over the past 3 years have helped us to understand the impact that we're having. Jack's story is also accumulative. Our understanding of Jack's experience being a quality one has been measured through the principles, but it's also helped my colleagues, children, young people, and our dancers to understand the impact that they're having. And importantly, the principles have helped us to understand our work much more clearly. So I'm going to hand over to Caroline now from the National Federation of Education Research to tell you more about what we've been doing.
Thank you very much, James. Yes, we started this work 3 years ago. Arts Council England commissioned it from NFER and from Shared Intelligence, our partners in this. And we were to address the strategic part of the plan, Goal 5 of Arts Council England's strategic plan. And this is to ensure that every child and young person has the opportunity to experience the richness of the arts, museums and libraries. Well, in order to do this, we wanted to be able to understand and compare the quality of work by, with and for children and young people, whether as participants, as audience members, or as artists. The ambition was to build on 3 pillars of existing research, quality frameworks that already existed in the sectors, and the expertise of the sector to develop a shared understanding for the Arts Council and the arts and cultural organisations themselves. So we started by conducting a literature review of theory, research and quality frameworks to identify principles of work that were indicative of high quality. We consulted extensively with the sector through an online forum, blogs and 2 seminars that met at different times in the project to discuss and trouble and come back to us with, you've got to rework these, this isn't quite right, you've got some of these right, some of the others need reworking. And we also convened a seminar specifically run by children and young people themselves, who then actually looked at the quality principles and came back to us and said, you've got to simplify this language. We kind of get what you're after, but the way you're expressing it isn't our language, so you need to simplify it. We identified 7 principles characterising high-quality work, and these principles provided a set of lenses through which to view the work that arts and cultural organisations do with children and young people. In the past year, we've been working more closely with 15 arts and cultural organisations who volunteered to pilot the quality principles. These organisations represent a range of different art forms, different types of practice, including participatory work and work produced for young audiences, and a range of sizes and types of organisations. It ranged from a one-person individual artist and his company to national organisations such as Reborn, the Royal Shakespeare Company and the Imperial War Museums. And we also involved networks such as Arts Connect and the Creating Change network. In turn, these 15 organisations have involved a total of 725 other organisations and over 47,000 children and young people in piloting the quality principles. We're about to work with a further 34 organisations, and we look forward to seeing the ripples of this work reaching out ever further. So what does the piloting involve? Well, we've helped all the pilot organisations to develop their own theory of change, to identify their specific focus, what they will do to implement the principles, and how they will evaluate for themselves the quality of their work and the impact on children and young people. They've helped us by keeping us informed of their progress and giving us their reflections on how the process has gone and what impact it's having. The pilot organisations have used the quality principles in many different ways. They've used it to audit the current practice, for peer review purposes, and learning, to change their evaluation strategies, and in planning and conducting new activities. Some have used all of the quality principles, others have focused on one or two of them. The pilot organisations all report that the process has been very useful in promoting deep reflection on the quality of their work. So far, the greatest impact has been on organisational culture and practice. So that is relating to the Wolf-Brown report, that is the second part of the report, rather than the individual impact. This initiative is further upstream than the Northwest Metrics project, and it will take time for the evidence of the impact on children and young people to emerge. To date, the pilot organisations have created new opportunities for children and young people's involvement and engagement in a range of different arts and cultural roles. This has ranged from listening to the voice of young people in a really attentive way to enabling their involvement in planning work. They have provided more opportunities for progression. For example, just a simple example, but realising the need to highlight and signpost progression routes from the beginning of a piece of work, rather than just waiting till the end to say, oh, well, if you're interested in following this up, then maybe you'd like to go over here. They've also helped develop young arts leaders, for example, young volunteers, now centrally involved in project planning and evaluation. The pilot organisations see the benefits of the work, and they anticipate that it will make for a more challenging, more engaging and higher quality experience for children and young people in the future. I'm now going to hand over to Ben Lee from Shared Intelligence, who is going to outline some key themes linking our work to the previous presentations and raise some questions, some questions for you, maybe that you'd like to help us answer after the break.
Okay. Thank you, Caroline. So that is exactly what I'm going to do. Try and link it back to some of what else we've heard today. So my name's Ben Lee. I work with an organisation called Shared Intelligence. We've been research partners with Caroline and colleagues at NFER. And so we started, James started this little slot with a story. I'm going to end with kind of 3 stories that hopefully will illustrate from some of the 15 organisations who've been piloting the quality principles to try and illustrate what are they, how do they work, and how do they relate to the other work. So my first example, and we've got to rattle through this very quickly, is Islington Community Theatre. Some of you will know of Islington Community Theatre, based, not surprisingly, just around the corner. An organisation which their main activity is establishing young theatre companies within the theatre as a whole, with different age groups. And their ethos is all about supporting young people in Islington, both as theatre makers and as individuals, through long-term commitment and long-term engagement. And it's really important for them that the authentic voice of those young people is heard in their work. And because of that long-term commitment, some of the young people who are involved over a period of years are offered the chance to become young associates with the company, which basically means they work alongside the paid staff, on projects. And earlier this year, Adam Coleman had recently joined as executive director. Adam is someone who's been part of the Quality Principles, part of that practitioner group that Caroline mentioned, right from the very beginning, working with Arts Council to help shape and co-produce this whole project. And he just joined as the exec director of Islington Community Theatre, and it was time for their kind of annual planning day, and Adam was there in a room with Ned Glazier, the artistic director, some of the other members of staff, including some of those young associates. That's how they did the planning. The young associates are part of the kind of annual planning because they're just as much kind of core to the company as the paid staff. And in discussing kind of the fine grain of their actual process, how they engage young people, one young associate, a guy called Corey, he was describing how he understood the process, and he said, blah, 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 and then we do this, and oh yeah, and then Ned goes away and has a secret meeting, and he comes back and tells us what's been decided. Fair enough? It was an absolute wake-up moment. Not just because for the people they sell tickets to, what they're selling is the authentic voice of youth in our production, but the real challenge to their work was it really challenged their theory of change, which is that the engagement, the experience, the encounter with arts that those young actors have is that they feel completely part of the production process. And this clearly was a challenge to that. And it was, I guess, Adam bringing in the quality principles to that organisation, which meant that they really kind of fixated on that question. And so the question from this example that I'm going to leave to think about over coffee is, how can we get closer to understanding the impact of arts encounters on young people as artists themselves? Maybe artists who are sometimes consumers of the work, sometimes producers, maybe a grey area in between. And I think there may be some analogies with the Manchester Metrics works there, if it can be extended to encompass that blurrier distinction between producers and consumers. My second example is the Create and Change Network. Caroline briefly mentioned it. There's a lot of other background. We haven't got time to go into all of it, but it's been created by a group of arts professionals based at Oval House Theatre, and they took the quality principles, all of them, as their call to action to create a network for artists who develop work for young children and young people at risk. So children in care, people who've been involved in the youth justice system, and so on. And in reading the transcripts and the notes from the kind of this initial round of national roundtables and workshops that they've held to try and bring people into their network and see whether they can be useful through this network, what we find is, I think it speaks to people in two ways. First, there's the co-production bit of it, which I think is very important, the way it's been co-produced with the sector. It doesn't feel like something which is top-down. But even more importantly than that, I think it's because it's created a language which is embracing and avoids falling into category traps, whether that's it embraces participatory arts practitioners as well as people who are not participatory arts, whatever you call that, normal arts, I don't know, mainstream arts, socially engaged arts practitioners, as well as kind of people who are not socially engaged, presumably, and also, most importantly, kind of children's art. It has language about children's art and culture, around progression and child-centeredness, as well as normal arts, real arts, striving for excellence, being inspiring, and so on. And so my second question is it helpful to consciously try and move on from those existing distinctions and categories and try and find some new ones as we move forward? And my final example is mystery shopping in the West Midlands. Priority 5 is a group of young people based in the West Midlands. They've got a paid coordinator, but essentially they are a teenager-led group. And what they do is, the mystery shopping thing is basically they go to cultural attractions around the West Midlands and they assess their experience, and they use the quality principles as the framework for assessing. So does it excite me? Does it inspire me? Do I get a sense of progression? And so on and so on and so forth. Some of the practical issues they come up with are very, very simple, very pragmatic, improve this, improve that. But some of the things they come up with are far more challenging. So for one member of the mystery shopper group, his experience, his encounter at one of the cultural attractions in the West Mids ended at the front door because that venue had nothing to offer him as a wheelchair user, nothing at all. So his experience of that venue, was sat in the minibus, contemplating. And I think for us, this really highlights kind of the third question, which I'm going to pose, which is, I think, goes beyond what is the nature of individuals' arts experiences, and it relates back to the other two questions, and it is, can we talk about the value of arts experiences relating to young people without also asking who is being ushered forward to have those experiences and have a bit of that magic, or whatever we want to call it, and takes us back to exactly the same point as James illustrated so brilliantly with Jack in Plymouth. Except in that case, it wasn't about deliberately being ushered. He was actually kind of chucked into that rehearsal room where he did have something really kind of life-changing, but he was chucked into it. Can we leave it to chance, though? So in terms of final question, and the way in which I think for us this sits with the Wolf Brown work, with the Manchester Metrics, with other work, like the Cultural Value Project, is that it's not just about, for our research, helping arts organisations understand how they improve the quality of individual encounters, but also, either implicitly or explicitly, I don't know, it raises the question, who are we ushering forward to experience those encounters? Thanks.